Okay, my good friends, get ready. Hold on to your hats. Shocker du jour for sure. Now, Avi Loeb is one of the top physicists from Harvard University, very, very well known, and he is an astrophysicist. He's looking for life and extraterrestrial things that are coming into our solar system, and they just believe they may have found something, and this is the article about it. Now, Avi Loeb also studied comet Oumuamua, which I did as well, and I have also studied comet 67P and Psyche and all the rest of them, and I have meteorites here that are literally biology, and I will explain to you and I'll show you. And so are the ones, comet 67P, Psyche, and Oumuamua are also biological. We're going to get into it right now, because he also has launched a project. I believe it's called Galileo. We'll look into that in a second. All right, stick with me. Please stick with me, because everything changes. Everything changes if what I say is correct, and I mean everything. Our history, science, space, physics, literally everything. Geology, the whole 9 yards. All right, get ready. Okay, my friends, this is going to be a great day, I hope. And that you can call me today Roger the Hopeful. Because I came across this article today. It just came out today. And this is Avi Loeb talking about particles in space. Are they of biological origin? And he's searching for life in space, extraterrestrial, whatever you want to call it. Now, he is not just some idiot on the street. He's renowned Harvard University astronomer Avi Loeb. He founded the Galileo Project. Now, I never heard of that before. This is looking for signatures of technology of extraterrestrial origin. Well, if we can find there was life in space, that's extraterrestrial. Now, what they did, I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you one thing for sure: there is life in space. Okay, everybody knows what comets are, and everybody knows what meteorites are, and asteroids. Well, is there a difference? Well, there is. Comets are things that circle around and they come back every so often. And as they approach the sun, they gas off. The dust doesn't blow off. It's gases coming out. And I'll explain to you where those gases are coming from, and I will show you those in a minute. But this was what Avi Loeb was studying. I'm going to tell you right now, that is a finger from a giant creature. And these things were absolutely enormous, of giant creatures. Now, this is the grip skin at the very, very tip of the finger. That's the tip of the finger. This is what they call an apical tuft. If you look at this strap running down here, that's the tendon. This is the joint right here. It's upside down. So you're like this here. And that is the crook of your finger, and that's up in here. There's another fold. But right at the top is an apical tuft, and that's this thing right here that holds the tendons in place. And there's one ball left, and there's a ton of balls that invest in this thing, and they all run back to the strap, and then all these little tabs are straps, and those straps go into holes. Hold on a second. All right, this is a bone. All right, this is where the bone, all these little strappy looking things would hang in here, and that reaches up to here so that you can twist your finger around it. That's the strap. Now, from the other side, going down this way, same thing. You got a bone here and a bone here, one going this way, one going that way, and it does that. So you have that. Now, down here is the knuckle, right there. That's the knuckle, right there, laying right off flat like that. And there's an artery over here, or the vein here. Arteries, the blood just runs out, you don't see it. The vein turns black. And these are the tendons that run right over the back of your knuckles. That's a fingertip. Now, and they say, oh, that's just an artist. No, what happened they did here is this is taken from a whole batch of different angles with different shadows. And then they composited it, and this gives you an absolutely stunning perfection of what this thing looks like. And I showed this to one of the top anatomists. He does autopsies all the time. He says, as far as he can determine, he said, his exact words was, that's the fingeriest looking finger I've ever seen. Now, obviously he can't say it's a finger, it's on outer space. He doesn't have it in his hands. I don't either, but I'm going to tell you right now, that is a finger. That's my conclusion. Now, I can also say that not only this, but there is a ton of other body parts in space. This right here is a tendon enthesis. These are tendon fibrils. That right there is a muscle bundle. And it ran up to something. And these are the tendons that just are short little tendons, and they break off where they meet the muscle. And this is the anchor. The anchor never, watch this. Here. You see this? This is the same thing. This is 67P. Now this goes back to 2015, and they made a lander come on here, the European Space Agency. It was called the Philae lander. It landed down in here. It sampled the particles. There's two of them, Kenneth and Juliet, they called them. And they did an analysis on them. They're life. They're 100% life. And it's biological, no question whatsoever. And they just couldn't explain it, so they walked away. But I can explain it, because you see this big jet coming out of there, that big white, what is that all about? Why is that doing that? And why are these little ones doing it here? And they're shooting off this way and that way and this way and that way and all over the different places, little bitty ones. And that gigantic monster, what is this all about? And what are these little bumpy, strappy looking things all around the edge? And why is this not gassing off like everything else? Why is that different? All right, so I looked at this very carefully. I can tell you exactly why this is happening, because this is a tendon enthesis. Everything requires blood in one major artery in most cases, and then it splits up all over. This is the major artery right here. That sunlight is going down into that hole and cooking that. That is the same gas that would come off of your gas grill. And it would burn. It would literally be burning if there was enough oxygen out here to do that, because this is really, really gassing off. Now, why are these little bitty ones? Well, because the big major one supplies all the little blood vessels. These are blood vessels. You have to have them all to supply everywhere. That's why there's one here. They're shooting out to wherever you were going to have biology attached to this, because the blood had to flow out there. So now they're gassing off as the sun hits it. The sun's hitting here and there's no gas. That's because this is an anchor. It doesn't have the blood. The blood is inside these tubes. Look at this tube. You want to see a tube? Here's a tube for you. It's 40 meters wide, is this wide. So you got 40, 80, 120 at least meters wide. That's 360, you'll figure close to 400 feet wide is that artery. That's how big this thing is. And they call them dragon balls. These are nothing more than little balls of blood. And when that sun hits it, and that's why when they get closer and closer to the sun, they gas off. They say, ooh, they got the tail, and then it sweeps away and you don't see the tail anymore. It's not just dust. It's quite obvious, and all you have to do is look at this and with an open mind. You can see it's not just dust blowing off there. It's biology. And I understand this. So there's no question whatsoever. What I'm saying is true. Now, in addition to that, I have meteorites here. I have several of them. A couple of them are magnetic, and they're lungs, little tiny lungs. And then I have this one here, which is what they call a stony meteorite. And it burnt off everything. from a giant fingertip from a human being. I believe it was it's the same as this one here. Right, this is just a little one, and it was, well, smaller than this, and it was on Earth. And that right there, I showed this the other day. I've been showing this quite a bit. These are the two veins, and there's the two veins here. That little hook, you see that hook? You see it? That's just the way they make it. That's the way fingers are made. And that's the vein side. They harden up and turn black. They just harden up. The other side is the blood side, the artery side. And the artery side stays very fluid and just runs completely out. You see it? One here, and one here. And I'll show you what a fingertip has for blood supplies. There's two on the side here, one in the front on each side, and two on the other side. And what happens is your arteries run down. This is where the red blood is. Always fluid. It almost never hardens up. I have coming out of the ground, still have blood literally running out of it. I'll show you one. So the red blood runs down here, almost never hardens up. Then it filters through the little blood vessels and capillaries and so forth, and makes it route back up this way. But by the time it hits here, it's a different molecule. Over here, it's called Fe2O2 or Fe2O3, which gives you 3 oxygens. And then there's also a lot of other things over here that don't transfer over. So when you get over to here, it's Fe2O2, and it turns black when it heats up. And it stabilizes, basically. When it stabilizes, let's go with that. And when you heat it up, it cooks it down to stability pretty quick. Normally just laying around, it will turn black over the course of time. But heat speeds everything up. Now, this exploded, this whole side, because it was red blood coming through space. Gets up to, I don't know, whatever degrees, hundreds and hundreds of degrees, and then the red blood here just popped right out of there. Originally, that would have been just like a fingertip, right the end of my finger. Coming through space, the fingernail burns off, the fingerprints burn off, everything burns off, and you end up with the actual structural part of a fingertip. That's literally the structural part. And look at this. You see that circle right there? This is the human body is absolutely stunning when you see it with mudfossil eyes. There's here and here, and the other one was over here, and that just exploded. And that right there, that ball, is an anchor. That anchored right into here, and then that tendon strap came down with all the other straps that come up to make your finger do this and that at the end. And this, again, is a terrestrial one. It didn't burn up. It turned flat because it was in the flood. And it still has all its fabric. This one, all the fabric is burnt off, basically. So you're down to just, sort of cooked connective tissues and so forth, membranes down in that area. This still has its skin, basically. Now, don't forget, that's umaro, and these are the tendons. That's the emplacement. That's the hinge. That's the other side where the tendons lock in. Here's where it's broken right off, where it would go right over the top of your knuckle. And these are the tendon fibers that come right up the side to make your finger be able to articulate. Get a real close look at it. All right, if you have to, come back, freeze it, and look at it. Think about it carefully. Look at. I mean, the architecture. It's not deniable, and I have the anatomists and the autopsy people look at it. They say absolutely no question whatsoever. What I'm saying is what it looks like. They can't say it's a finger, but they say it's exactly what I'm saying. It's exactly what I'm saying. And it is exactly what I'm saying. And all the other stuff is coming out of space is also creature body parts. So I have to go along with that's the same thing. There's no question about this. I mean, if you can deny this, I would like to see you deny it. Now, I'm hoping Avi Loeb is going to be in our corner. And like I said, I got stuff coming out of rocks. It's just, well, here's what I had blood coming out. You see that? That's a lung. And here's the key. It depends on where the body was and how long it was soaked for, what the temperature was, what the depth of the water was, how much silicates, how much actual blood, literally the blood, because that's the transition metals. Now, what do we have here? We have lungs. That's a lung. You see inside here all that red stuff? That's blood. Now, it's been evacuated because it was in a condition where it just eroded to the point where you have some structure left. And if you break into here, you can find, there's plenty of blood in here. There's a ton of blood. And all of these are the little alveoli cavities, which I'm going to show you in the lungs in a second. So that would be a lung, just like that. All right, now, that's a lung. That actually had blood coming out of it. When I took it out of the ground, you see here, well, not all of them, but most of these little red spots had a little tiny blob of blood coming out. Now, because there was so much silicates in the water, wherever there was empty spots, they just filled in with these, what you'd call quartz. And the empty holes in your alveoli, which would normally be here, your oxygen would be going in there, ends up, if it didn't fill up with something, it would end up filling up with silicates. Now, over here, this lung was laying like this, so the blood was down at the bottom. So this lung would have been just like this, but it would have been dying like that. So now the blood stays down here. Up here, there's no blood. So it had to die laying like this. The blood saturated down to the bottom, and that's where it all soaked here. And then when I took it out of the mud, because it doesn't even know it's dead, just about, because if it's in mud, that is nothing more than just molecular flesh. So all it is molecules of eroded flesh. That's all mud is. You know, and also you can have eroded trees and stuff like that, but it is eroded biology. And at this point, most of these things were animals. You know, right next to it is going to be the rest of the animal, so it's going to be inside of that fleshiness. Now, here's what happened when it came out of the ground. Not all of them, but a lot of those little bops, blood came out of them. Right here. Now, this is the other lung here, which I have here in my shop, and this one hardly got eroded at all. Now, this one has all of what they call a pleura. This is a rubber bag that coats the lung. This one has none left. Zero, gone. And this one has, beyond that, all that stuff is gone, and it's also eroded down into all the alveoli and all the tubing and the plumbing. All right, so there was some difference in chemistry, pH, whatever, temperature it was cooked and how long it was cooked, because this was a hot water flood. That's what created all this stuff, and that's what created all the silicates. I have all this stuff very well documented, nucleophilic substitution, so forth. Now, remember I talked about the fingertips? At the very end you have two, on the side you have two, on the other side you have two. All right, that's how they work. All right, so coming up, you've got the artery. There's one spot here for the artery. There's another spot here for the artery. And in this case, they just ran out. And then at the very tip, there's another spot for the artery. So there they are. Boom, boom, boom. Here it is. Now, why happened this? Why didn't this blow up? This side is the vein. So the vein is here, it has one here, and it has one here, same thing. Normally they're going to be sucking the used up blood and bringing it back to the heart. You see? Comes down and comes back. Comes down, comes back. Comes down, comes back. That's just and in the meantime, it filters over. And it filters to stay, all you red blood stay that way, all you used blood go this way. Simply, and once it goes that way, it can't come back. That's the key. There's valves. Arteries have no valves. The blood runs down, go anywhere you want. Go down, come back, squirt all over it. As long as it's in the red blood side, you do anything you want with it. Once it gets over to this side, no way. It comes back only. So they have valve, 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 valve. And once it gets past that valve, it can't come back. All right, because it's already used up. So anyway, these two, this is the one that came through space, and this is the one that was on Earth. Both of them fingertips, and both of them from giant, look like human beings to me. And mine was DNA tested and CAT scanned and everything else, some of them. The biggest one, there's no way you can get that CAT scan. But I did get a DNA tested, and that's this one right here. This is huge. It's 3 feet long, from here to here. 3 feet long. These are the blood supplies. This is the pad. There's a little pad between all of your bones so that they don't bump into each other and scrape. That's literally the fingernail. Still that good. And not only that, the fingerprints are still on here. Now remember, this is approximately 36 inches from front to back. And I had to break this off so I could get some blood, because you can't get blood out of the top. And here's what I did. I broke it off. Where is it? Right here. So that's the fingerprint, the finger tip, the whole thing. I broke that spot off on the side. This is that spot. All right? That's fingerprint ridges. The same thing in your fingerprint. These are the sweat pores that are right in the little sweat pores. This I had to break it off. And it came right off just like that. But down inside, saturated with blood. Saturated. It came out, and they said excellent quality, no possibility of contamination or anything else. All right, because it was literally almost like wet red blood. And here's another one. Here's a rock. Okay, well, they're all rocks now, but that was a bone. All right, and they have blood coming out of them. You take them out of the mud, they just leak their blood back out. And that was after I pulled the scab off and the white fibrin, which is the clotting factor, was below. I had another shot before I took it out. Here's where it just sat on the counter, and I looked over and I said, "Oh, look at that blood coming out of here." And then I moved the scab off, and then the white things. And in the ground, you may not see that. But if you leave them laying around long enough, if they came out of a nice, wet, muddy spot, they could very easily leak the blood out of them. Just like that did. So I have so much evidence, and I'm hoping for Avi Loeb to help with this. And here's the I don't know if I showed you this or not, but this right here is the chemistry. And what do you see here? Fe. What does that mean? Those are iron oxides. And there's different iron oxides, which is what happens in your lungs. You breathe in oxygen, which is, and it adheres to the iron, which makes it an iron oxide. Right? When it goes through your body, it's Fe2O3, which is going to be 3 oxygens. Now, as it goes through your body, one of them gets sucked off. So you end up with Fe2O2, and then it gets recharged and so forth. But these are the different oxygenation states. And then everybody knows you got hydrocarbons in you. You know, that's basically what biology is built around. And then you got sodium, silicon, carbon, you know, it's just all biology. And they agreed. These are the 2 particles, Kenneth and Juliet, that they tested right on the surface while they had their lander sitting right on here somewhere. And this is nothing more than eroded, dusty blood. All right? And that is the bundle for the muscles. That's the tendons. I showed you all the blood supply running off. Now, the problem is for getting people to get their mind from being collided with. Velikovsky reported every culture on the history on the planet, every single culture, 100%, had a very similar story at this basically same time, which was about 1500 BC. Now, there was other catastrophes, yes, and that was also, he claimed, there was at least 2 more that he knew of. And they happened within hundreds of years in between, and apparently Venus kept making swoops and causing upheaval. But anyway, this was the worst one, 1500 BC, and he reported on this. It was called Worlds in Collision, and he was destroyed, absolutely destroyed, for making these statements. They make him take his book off the bookshelves. It was a nightmare. So I wrote this book about him because I had the same thing happen to me. And it's called Minds in Collision. Now this is the key. What I just showed you, if you can discount all that, all this evidence, and I have the DNA reports for my stuff. I have DNA reports. I have CAT scans of the smaller fingertips and so forth. And I'm showing you the chemistry. I don't know what else I can do to make my case other than have it examined. Because I have them here. This is a meteorite. All right, they say that's a meteorite, a rocky meteorite, stony meteorite. And that, I'm telling you right now, is blood. This can be tested. No question whatsoever. I'm done testing stuff. Nobody paying attention. Nobody will give you a moment now. Will Avi Loeb? Am I just too far off the scale for Avi Loeb too? Could be. All right, here's an iron meteorite. All right, this is just a little one, but this is also a lung. That's the plumbing of the lung. And I could show you this. This still has blood in it. All right, I have another one here. This is another tiny one, but the lungs and the hearts preserved very well, even though they burnt up. The blood's still in them. You want to see a meteorite? They cut it right down the middle, and you can see the vein and the artery inside the center of the iron meteorite. What's it doing there? Let's find out about that. All right, you see this? This is an iron meteorite. They cut it and etched it with a little bit of acid. I'm sure they did that. Now, what does it show here? That's an artery and that's a vein. Now, you have to understand chemistry. You have to understand anatomy. You have to understand that this is filled with blood. And I believe this was probably a liver, or it could have been a heart. But there's a ton of metals in the liver and in the heart and in the lungs, and they all turn into metal as they come through. That's why what I'm going to show you here, this metal little lung, and I'm going to put it in a microscope in a second. You'll see it. It's just undeniable. And it even has the latch on this that is on all the lungs. And I'll show you that in another, when we get it in a microscope. I mean, it's just undeniable. So what happens is as they heat up, they smelt. Now, I understand smelting extremely well. You want to see something? This was my father was general manager for Wallingford Steel Company. You see this up here? Wallingford Steel, super steels, stainless steels. That goes back to 1960 area. Somewhere around there. I worked on that car. That's a stainless steel 1936 Ford. Stainless steel. There was only 6 of them ever made, and they couldn't continue to make them because they're just so tough, that metal, that it could not withstand the dyes. But this was found, and we restored that car. I put the floorboards in, and they weren't floorboards. They were made out of red oak. That was when I was a kid. I used to, anyway. But I understand smelting. I understand these. I understand all of this stuff now. And you can't understand just one little bit in piece. You got to understand the whole thing. If you don't understand anything. And you got to start with electron flood theory, because none of the things that they think about on the subatomic level are correct, because subatomic is not protons and neutrons, it's dipole electrons. And 1,823 of them make up a proton. Very, very simple. Clears up 100%. All right, something to understand about iron meteorites. They're magnetic, but they are not magnets. In other words, if I take magnets, these are little magnets, and I put it up next to something that's iron, basically, which is this screw, it attracts. But that screw itself is not a magnet. The screw will attract magnets. Now, the same thing here. That screw won't do anything. It just falls right off. It has no effect on this, because neither one of these are magnetic, but they are both, neither one of them are magnets. They are both magnetic. All right, because they are iron. What does iron do? Why is it magnetic? Why would iron be magnetic? The only possible reason is it wants more negative particles, the white particles. There's more black particles in there than there is white. So the white ones want to come to here to attach to it. White will always crust over the black. That's why we've never seen the black is always inside. All you can see is the white because it bounces back at you as light. All right, I'm going to probably wrap it up pretty quick. I've shown you all of these different things, the Amaru and 67P and the lungs and the scabs and where the blood comes from, the giant fingertips, the spectroscopy, all that stuff. My book. This was supposedly some of the oldest stuff in the solar system, which is just a fingertip, basically. All right, like I said, this gets kind of deep because you have to know everything about everything. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to make sense. And you have to understand the ancient texts, how they talked about battles in the heavens and giants and all that stuff being wiped off the face of the earth. And then Velikovsky's research on how Venus was ejected from Jupiter, almost hit Earth, caused all kinds of catastrophe, and then actually impacted with Mars. All of that stuff is now being able to be seen. We can see these scars and these electrical discharge marks, all of that stuff. And this is all biology. I show you the blood coming out of the middle of an iron meteorite. What the hell is that all about? The psyche, common psyche, is, I believe, a heart. It's 100% metals, just like that's metal. Even like my little iron meteorite here is mostly metal. It's been cooked off. It's the same. It's called smelting. They smelt off the stuff that's just the cheap stuff, and they keep the iron. That's how they make iron. Now, something else happened in space that was very, very, very strange. This is what happened. When they were up in the Russian space station, they injected charged particles, which are these little glowy ones. They're charged. They have a glow to them because they're charged. And they injected them into a vacuum chamber, which has no gases, no nothing, no molecules, no nothing in it. And they flowed right in, and it streamed in. And then they swirled in for a minute, and then they started to do this. And it freaked these people out. This was in this. They contacted the Earth guys who couldn't believe it either. They just freaked out. That shouldn't happen. They thought they were going to be making lattices where everybody would stay away from each other because the whites oppose each other. But look at this. They're congealed here. They're congested. They're tight. They're up against each other. They're glowing because they want so desperately to be attached to that black that they will fight each other to get to that black. That's what electricity is. It's charged particles trying to get to muons. Now that's just half of it. Look at this. That's DNA. That looks like DNA to everybody. And this happened with those charged particles. They just assembled into these DNA double helix strands. That freaked everybody out. All right, let me just finish up because I am going to do a whole new series on the ancient myths. What I have just shown you tells me that the ancient myths need to be completely re-examined. Nobody's ever even considered them to be a possibility. Well, now I'm looking at it. If you read Apollodorus 1.6.3, he talks about Typhon. And I have found Typhon, no question whatsoever, shown it hundreds of times. Nobody's contesting it. It's too big to think about. And this is the exceptional preservation of all these soft-bodied creatures because of the silica-rich oceans. Yes. And this is Yale. This is a year after I finally presented my last final things to them. They took credit for my research, so that's what happens. Now, the silica-rich, see that silica? That's a lung. And that's that little spot on the end. You see how scruffy looking that is? This is completely nucleophilically changed from being just a lung to all of this, which is feldspar now. But the silica fills in the holes. You see like that hole right there? Same sort of thing. that hole would have filled in with silica. But this was in a different condition, and it all washed out quick enough where it didn't just soak and start to grow the silicates. Now other ones, like this heart, that's the aorta of the heart. All right, this is a ventricle wall right there. And this was in the silicate so long that it completely transitioned. Now, then you have other ones like this. This is a tiny lung. I don't know what it's from, but that's the entrance to the side. And that right there, my friends, is the part that I'm going to be showing you right in a second, which locks the lung into position in the body so it doesn't go, it can move around, but it's anchored. All right, same thing as this one's anchored. You see it? It was anchored here in the body so it can move around with your body, but it doesn't go ripped and flopping all over. And the same thing with this one here, as I showed you. That little tab at the end is the same thing. Now this one's bled out more. Now the one came through space. I'm going to show you in a second. I got it soaking here in this rag. Keep it wet. This is the iron one. All right, and I am going to show you the cavities in here, which are nothing more than the cavities in here. Same thing, only this one cooked off until all that was really left was the iron blood, which is the iron red blood like this right here. But it cooked off until all the cheap stuff was gone, and the Fe, the iron, was left primarily. Now I got to put a little more water on it. They dry up quick. Now what I'm going to show you is the fabric that's on this still has a tiny little taste of this. Originally this was exactly like that. It was basically exactly like this. And it even has that tab. Remember I talked about the tab? I'll show you that tab. But what we need to do is start over again with new books and understand what our real history is, because it relates to everything. I mean, it's 100% changed. 100% of everything changes. When you get into nuclear particles, the electron flood theory, everything has to change, 100%. Even this. Completely changed, totally changed. The periodic table has changed. Everything's in space has changed, quite obviously. I just showed you. Everything on Earth is biology. There is no geology. It's bodies turned into material that makes up the Earth. And Ovid spoke of this. The first lines in his writing was, I intend to speak of bodies transformed into new entities. And it consisted of giant creatures could turn themselves, they were gods. They could turn themselves into mushrooms and fungus and rain and oceans and planets and moons, anything they wanted. And they could just go jump back and forth. And that's how they converted themselves from planets, which Jupiter is Zeus, the size of the biggest planet in the solar system, turned himself into the size of a human being to come down and have sex with the women. And then they had giants. Then he said, ooh, that's a big, I messed up. We got to wipe them all off. So he sent Venus to destroy Earth, and it basically did, wiped almost everything off except just a little taste. And Prometheus comes into this because he was the father of Noah. This goes so deep. And stay tuned, because the next one's going to blow your mind off, and it's going to be extremely controversial. I know I'm going to be attacked like from every single position that they can attack from, because I'm going to tell you things that change everybody's feelings of virtually everything. You know, well, let's put it this way. A lot of the things that you were led to believe, as you see, are just not correct. And what does that involve when you start to bring it back to its fullness? Well, it involves a hell of a lot. So stay tuned, because we're going to go back through the myths. The myths are the ones we want to look into. And Prometheus is the guy who actually created man. He was the guy that molded man, and in the beginning, all there was men. There was no women. And guess what? They sent Pandora to be a punishment for man. The first woman was a punishment for man. That's what it says in the myths. We're going to go through this. This is going to be, I'm going to have a lot of fun doing this, because I now know I can't dispute a lot of this stuff. So what does it mean? The only thing I can take from the meaning is that Jesus Christ did come here to warn us and said, everything you've been taught was wrong. Just forget about it. And he does. It says that they're going to fool you with teachers that concoct stories, and their destruction does not sleep. And that's what we have been. We're being destroyed by the academic system, which to them, religion, stay away from that stuff. So anyway, let's, I'm going to show you one last little shot of this in the microscope, and then Vayos con Dios, amigos. Okay, remember I showed you those latches? That's that latch right there on the lung that came through space. Now, I'm pointing it right there. That's the latch. Okay, see it coming around? Now, I'm going to put a little bit of more moisture on there so that it becomes a little more apparent. And then we're going to look, see it right there? That's that little tab. And it comes running right down the side of the lung, just like all of them. And it locks that lung into position. Even, let me show you something else. All right, you see that latch? Every single organ, every single body part is attached to the other body parts by one of these latches. You see that? That's, I'm going to call that the Spurlock. I talked to the top anatomists. They say, no, that's just part of the fascia, which is now called the interstitium, this area. And there's interstitial highway that runs right at the tips of this. I'm going to show you there's two little tiny holes. This is also unknown. I discovered the interstitium 15 years ago. 2009 was when I realized these things were loaded with this, what they now call interstitium. They never saw it because by the time they had autopsy, it was flat as a pancake. I could see it because it's in these fully formed body parts. And anyway, I found that, and now I found this lock. So I'm going to call this the Spurlock. Now, that attaches to every lung and every body part. This is a piece of meat. I have this here, hold on. All right, here's the lung. This is a little lung, and this is a terrestrial film. I don't know what, maybe it's a chipmunk or something, who knows. But that's the latch that holds that lung in position so it can wobble around, and that's where the air came in. And a transition, this is nucleophilic substitution, and it depends on where it was. Again, this is the one on this one. There's the latch on this one. And the latches on these are exactly the same, and there is actually tubing running through here. And I'll show you that tubing in a second, but let's go back to the iron meteorite and finish up with that. All right, it's pretty obvious there's a fabric on this. And if you scorch this and burnt off all of the fabric-y stuff, you'd end up with the transition metals, which are the ferrous oxides, would turn black and red, and the fabric would pretty much go away, because that's the cheap stuff. Now, let's look at the microscope shot of the iron meteorite, which is this one right here. There's a microscope. We're going to be looking down on it. This is a telescoping microscope. Works pretty good. All right, so here we are with that little tiny iron meteorite. And this is the cavity. This is one of the biggest cavities. And you see the little holes going down in here? That fed all of the alveoli. Now, it still has some of these tiny little fabric white ones, but most primarily are burnt off. And it's smelted down to where it has become magnetic. You know, it's become iron. Let's put it that way. Now, I believe there's still DNA in there. Now, I'm not going to test it. I've done DNA testing on 3 different samples. Nobody would give me the time of day. Now, I'm hoping that Avi Loeb will pay attention to this. This is what he's looking for. This is what I got. And I have it right here in my shop. And not only that, I have the giant ones from that giant fingertip. I believe I showed you that. And that came through space, too. Of that, there is no question either. So, to me, this is a new day. And hopefully we're going to be able to explore this in a rational way rather than just reject it because we're afraid. You see the cavities going into the little holes there? That's how you breathe. Was an oxygen-breathing creature at one point. And the blood is leaked out, and some of the fabric is still here. But right in there is where the blood was. All right, this is just a test. I just scratched that little stuff out of that blood vessel right there, out of the alveoli. Now, what I'm going to do is put some hydrogen peroxide in here. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. That means it has an extra oxygen. And you have stuff in your blood that's supposed to reject that extra oxygen. If it's truly blood, it should foam up like crazy. Now, it may not be able to foam up coming through space. It may have cooked that enzyme off, but maybe it will. Who knows? And it's going to, oop, there it goes. I can see it bubbling. There is catalase in there. Let's keep watching it for a while. Watch the bubbles come out. You see, it's filtering down into where the enzymes are in the blood. I'll put a little more in there. This is exciting. This is actually literally biology from space, my friends. And this is actually wet red blood down inside there. Now watch. You see where the blood would be down inside there? Why are these bubbles coming out? This is where you have to understand chemistry. You have to understand the biology. You have to understand literally everything about how chemistry works inside a biological organism. It's spitting out all of that oxygen. And why? Because H2O2 is not H2O. H2O is water. That's fine. No problem with water. Wow, look at this thing. It's just I believe that's just a chunk of blood coming out of there, but it almost looks alive. But this is, there's blood in here. And you see it's coming out everywhere where there's holes that leak down into the alveoli where there is still blood. And now if I put more and more in here, it'll keep coming out more and more because it's penetrating in. But you see, there's nothing coming around here. It's only where the blood is. And that's because the enzyme that is in the blood says, I don't want any oxygen in here. I don't want any excessive oxygen. It's called ROS, reactive oxygen species. This enzyme, which is catalase, is part of your body. It's built into your blood system. It says, if I see anything that has an extra oxygen, break it off and get it out of here, blow it out of here. And it does. That'll just keep going for as much blood is in here. And the thing is saturated with blood. If you broke that in half, it could very likely bleed. I'm serious. There is that much blood in these things. Some of them are just unbelievable amount of blood. Okay, I'm going to leave it at this. I'm hoping Avi Loeb will contact me. This is the Galileo Project. They're all looking for this stuff. I have actually literally blood from space. Now, I don't think this little iron meteorite is from a human being. I don't know what it's from. But there's DNA in here, I can tell you that, for no question whatsoever. Now, would it be complete strands? I have no idea. But I have found the things that they are talking about looking for, and I really, really, really want to engage and get this open to the public and be able to discuss it openly. And he's the only one I've seen in academia that appears to have the mindset that will allow this. So Avi Loeb, please, sir, I'm here and I'm 100% willing to work with you in any way you'd like. And I am not far from you. I am in Connecticut, so I know you're in Massachusetts, and I know you travel, so I'm here.